Welcome back to the Partnership Mastermind podcast, where we unpack what actually works in SaaS partnerships. I'm your host, Chris Lavoie. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by someone who's become not just a personal mentor, but also is one of the sharpest operators in our space, Greg Portnoy, founder and CEO of Euler. What I love about Greg is he's not just building great tech, he's helping teams finally answer that question, is this partner actually influence revenue? He's also become one of the most trusted voices on LinkedIn when it comes to what modern teams actually need to scale. Today, we're going to get into the story behind Euler, the systems they're shipping, and the mindset behind founder-led GTM that's resonating across the industry. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Happy to be here, my friend.
All right, let's dive in. So we always warm up with each guest with a set of 5 quick hitters. Some of them are about partnerships, but more so general. And this is just going to give our audience a look into your life and a little bit about your mindset. You ready for that?
Let's do it.
Cool. First things first, what was your first ever job and what's one lesson from it you still carry?
You know, I can't remember if it was selling TVs at Best Buy or if it was delivering pizza, but it was one of those two things. I'll use the Best Buy example because I'm not sure there's a lot you can learn from delivering pizza, other than the fastest way to get it from one point to another, especially back in the day before GPS was a thing. But at Best Buy, you know, I think I just learned what sales really is because I was in there. I was like 16 years old, maybe even 15, and I'm selling like TVs that are thousands of dollars to people. I remember I was the first person to sell like the first plasma TV we ever had, which was like at the time was like $15,000. It was something astronomical. And you just start to understand like how people tick. And I was like, oh, this is very interesting that a 16-year-old can sell like a 40-something-year-old dude a $15,000 TV. So it started to teach me a little bit about people, which I found out very interesting.
That's a great example. My first job was at Canadian Tire, basically like a Dick's Sporting Goods in our sports department, selling bikes, canoes, hockey sticks. So I got the itch there as well for kind of how people tick. So I love that.
That was my second job, was selling snowboards at a sports chalet.
Love it. Well, the sales start seemingly a good place to begin. Cool. Next up is what's a just for fun hobby or obsession people might not expect from you?
I mean, it's snowboarding for sure. Like it's like literally my favorite thing in the world to do. Before I met my wife and had my son, it was my favorite thing in the world. So I haven't done as much of it since starting Euler and having a child as I would like to, but I used to be a snowboarding instructor back in college, which I think people would not know. You know, I love snowboarding. I think it's just one of the most amazing things to just throw in some headphones and then just point it down a run and just get into a flow state where like you can't be distracted, because if you get distracted, you're falling off a cliff or hitting a tree.
Wow. Well, that might be a nice segue into our future conversation about being a first-time founder, of not getting too distracted. You might run into a tree, but we'll get there. And also love snowboarding, but somehow you ended up in San Diego. We'll try to unpack that one as well later. But next question for you. What's a hot take about partnerships that would probably start a fight on LinkedIn?
Oh, God. I have two sides to this because there's two sides to the problem. The one thing, and I've tried some tough love on LinkedIn, and let's be honest, it did not play well. People don't like to be told that the emperor has no clothes. But it's the fact that partnerships people really need to become more rigorous operators. And honestly, like that's why I love Partnership Mastermind, is because that's exactly what you're building. You're building rigorous partnerships operators. And there is absolutely zero chance of partnerships becoming the widely adopted and successful channel that we want it to be without partnerships people becoming more rigorous operators, process-oriented, data-driven. So like there's no shortcuts here. Like it just has to happen. Like they just need to learn how to operate with process and data and rigor. So that's one side of it. And the other side of it is just that most executives and boards are intellectually lazy. They are just leaving so much opportunity and money on the table because they're just trying to hit the easy button on the process that has worked for decades around like predictable revenue, and use sales and marketing in these channels instead of really taking what would not be a long time to truly understand what partnerships is and how it works, and really building game-changing businesses. So I would say those are the two things.
Yeah, those are great. But Greg there spoke about from the IC level, the practitioners and having that operational mindset, which we're definitely going to unpack later on, but then also at the leadership level. And you've been quite vocal, you've been quite vulnerable actually in sharing some of your failures and tough learnings earlier in your career that have parlayed into building Euler, which we'll also get into. So that's a great one. Second last question here, and then we'll get into the good stuff, is if you had to give yourself if your operating style, a code name, what would it be? So if you were to characterize or label how you operate, so to speak, what would that look like?
I mean, I don't want to be too self-effacing and call it ADHD because I have ADHD. But ultimately, it's just kind of like get shit done, you know? And try really hard not to confuse activity for productivity because I think that that's very easy to do. But as we'll get into, being a partner leader is arguably the most entrepreneurial role you can have in a business. And being a CEO and a founder is literally the most entrepreneurial role you can have in a business. And the two are insanely similar. So like you can't take too long strategizing. You can't take too long like thinking about what you're going to do or thinking about the process. Like you need it, but ultimately like you have to make things happen.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, your proof's in the pudding with having the GSD mindset. And I love the segue into the entrepreneurial element of partnerships, which is one of my favorite things as well. But we'll talk about that later. And just to wrap up here, who's one person in the partner world that more people should be learning from? As a spoiler, other guests we've interviewed have referenced you, not surprisingly, but would love to hear who's one person out there that you're like, you know what? This person is actually providing some really useful stuff here.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is I know who referenced me, and this is not intentional, and I would have done it even if he hadn't, but I'm going to reference him, Rob Moyer. I've gotten to know Rob pretty well over the last, let's call it year or so. And the guy is just an incredible operator. And his mindset that he brings to the job and is just so, it's similar to mine, but it's different because he's built different things. He's done it longer than I have. He started in like the traditional channel with distributors and resellers and moved into like what we look at as modern partnerships. And he did it in the old world and he did it in the new world. And the guy knows so much. And he also just kind of like defaults to action, but in a very structured, measurable way. And the stuff he puts out, like I probably look like a stan on LinkedIn because like he posts stuff and I'm like, this is phenomenal. Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah. I mean, I got to say you and him both are definitely top two in my view. And it seemed like Rob just woke up one day and he's like, I'm just going to start ripping it. And he's just emptying the tank. And it's incredible. If you were to compile all of his recent posts, you could publish a high-end book just on that content alone. So I'll let Rob know. Yeah, exactly. Over 1,000 individual users already. Cool, man. All right. Well, look, thanks for the quick hitters. I think we have a better understanding of you now. Let's get into the fun stuff. And I want to start with Euler, your newest project. And I want to start with the origin story. So let's rewind the tape a bit. Can you take us back to that early spark? What made you realize that this was the right time to build Euler? What pain were you living maybe that made you say, I have to build this now?
Yeah. So you know, I did partnerships for 10 years. I built 4 programs and I did it all the hard way. And then I didn't really realize that my way of operating that I had learned from my VP, Ryan Murden, was not the norm. You know, I've said this a lot of times, but I feel like it's kind of like learning to swim with good form, right? If you're taught from an early age to swim with good form, like swimming is just easy and effortless for you more or less. But if you weren't and you try to learn later in life, it's super difficult to do so. And I just learned the right way from Ryan. And then that's how I built my programs. And I thought that that's just how partnerships worked. And then when I was doing consulting work, after a small exit, I realized that it was not the norm. And, you know, I was just always very curious, like, hey, partnerships is so incredible. Like it's such an efficient, powerful, strategic growth driver for businesses. Why aren't more businesses adopting it? And then I kind of started to like look into it and realized, oh, it's because most partner teams are not operating in this rigorous way. They're not measurable, they're not scalable, and they're certainly not predictable. And so I kind of just like had this moment where I'm like, I think there's a lot of challenges in partnerships that could be solved, should be solved. And if you look at any other GTM channel, they have a plethora of tools to help them do like every single aspect of their job, if not all of it. And partnerships basically didn't really have anything, right? They had like these traditional PRMs, these legacy PRMs that had been built for this old way of partnering that didn't apply to most companies today. Or they had like affiliate platforms masquerading as PRMs that did a few things well, but didn't by and large cover most of what you do in partnerships. And so it started as kind of like this small idea of like, hey, let's just make referrals and payments really easy. And so I took a very beginner's mindset to it, and I spent 3 months before we ever wrote a single line of code just talking to every partner leader that I could get on the phone. And fortunately, I had a nice network of them from my 10 years doing the job. And I was like, just like, hey, is this gap really real? Do you not have tools and systems? What are you doing? How are you doing it? Where are your challenges? And the response was just unanimous that like there was nothing good out on the market, and that everyone was just doing things manually in spreadsheets and email and Slack and, maybe the CRM. And it really evolved over time. Like what Euler is today was not what Euler was when it was conceptualized. And so just realized there was a gap in partnerships and just kind of started building and really staying very, very close to the users in the market. And we just kind of have kept evolving it based on what people have told us they needed and what we've seen would be valuable.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone listening, I mean, that sounds like every successful entrepreneurial story where it's like, I lived it, I became a subject matter expert, I realized a gap in the market, and I was able to capitalize on that, which I think is how it should be. And it's clear, having been inside Euler, familiar with the product and platform, it's clear that it was built by somebody who deeply understands not just partnerships, but the modern state of partnerships and how it works. And I was fortunate to be one of those people you did talk to initially. I don't even know if you remember, but you reached out to me on the Slack, the Partnership Leaders Slack. I think it was early 2023. And I had known about you, but I didn't know you personally. And you reached out and we had a call. And I was facing a lot of these challenges. So I'm pretty sure I just let it rip. And I was quite candid about the challenges I was facing. And so I'm thrilled that fast forward to now, you have a tangible tool that solves all of these great problems.
I do remember that conversation. It was one of my favorite conversations because, you have an operational mindset. And so you knew exactly where the problems were and what you needed or wanted to solve it.
Yeah, well, no, I'm glad I was able to contribute a little bit to what Euler is kind of perhaps today. But speaking of which, let's get inside the product and talk about what Euler actually solves. So for someone who's never used it, what is Euler in plain English? What problem does it solve? And perhaps how is it different than what the legacy software?
Yeah, absolutely. So Euler, you can think of it as what PRMs were kind of meant to be, right? If you think about the name PRM, it's partner relationship management. But if you've ever been inside any other PRM in the market, they don't actually allow you to manage any aspect of your partner relationship. All they do is give you a place to put resources for your partners to theoretically register deals or submit referrals, to maybe create some sort of incentivization structure, give them affiliate links, and maybe a portal to log into to find those things, right? I think any partner manager or partner leader worth their salt would say that is a very, very small portion of what partner management actually is. And so what we've really built is what I believe is the first actual partner relationship management platform. And so we've done so by really zooming out and thinking about what is everything that goes into a partner relationship, from the first touch where maybe they're applying to work with you to kind of the ongoing management, because there is no last touch in partnerships if you're doing it right. And everything in between, from partner applications, contracting, onboarding, enablement, training, certification, ongoing engagement, tracking referrals and leads and deals and affiliate links, syncing all of that with the CRM, calculating and paying commissions off of that, reporting on that, and giving that data back to the partnerships team to make informed decisions. And that's just the side of the partner manager. Rob Moyer always likes to say, like, it's the first platform built with the partner manager in mind, because it is like we actually, our goal is that the partner manager can like live in it. And then on the flip side, you have the partner experience, which again, PRMs were built in this very old way where they assume that like, your partners are going to log into your portal. If you're Salesforce, if you're Snowflake, if you're, ServiceNow, If you're the center of an ecosystem, you may possibly have the leverage to make your partners log into your portal. Anybody else, you'll be lucky if you get 10 to 15% adoption. And that's been the average over the last 30 years. So we actually built it with the flipped idea in mind of like, hey, let's stop trying to change human nature. Let's just push everything out to partners via email and Slack at the right time. Update on a referral, they get a notification. Deals are moving forward in your sales cycle they've sent you, they get a notification. You've uploaded new resources or trainings for them, or maybe like an onboarding flow, they get a notification. And so on and so forth. Just an idea of like, hey, how do we engage the partner proactively, get them what they need when they need it without them having to lift a finger? And hey, let's remember that partner managers don't have client relationships. I did e-com partnerships for 10 years. I could not introduce you to a single brand. So then think about all the client-facing teams that you want to stay in front of at your partner, the sales reps, the account reps. We have mechanisms to engage those folks and incentivize them. So it's this idea of think about all of the things that a partnerships team does and all the things that a partner does with you. Now eliminate everything that can be automated, increase engagement, increase efficiency, and increase measurability. And that's what we've built. Like it's literally an all-encompassing partner relationship management and operating and data analytics platform, all just ruthlessly focused on one thing, which is how do we help you scale partner revenue without having to scale resources.
I mean, that last line is a bar for sure that should resonate with anyone listening, whether you're an IC or you're a leader who owns a budget. And one of the things I love about what you just said there and just about you in general is the measurable part. That's a key theme of this whole podcast. We have people on who are about measuring outcomes. And another final thing on the breakdown of Euler that's really important, as you described it being the first tool built for modern partner management. I think a big shift, and you've been doing this longer than I have, Greg, compared to previous partnership type roles, is partner managers nowadays are what I call full life cycle, right? And I teach this a lot in the mastermind boot camps where, you're responsible for a lot. You've got to be BDR and hunt prospective new partners. You've got to get them into a discovery environment, do a little bit of flirting. You got to convince them to sign. Then you got to turn into the onboarding manager and onboard them. But then you're also, the customer success manager to take care of that relationship and scale it. Right. And that's a really complex role that requires different sets of skill sets and tools and system and tracking. So it sounds like that's what Euler is now built for, is the modern full lifecycle partner manager who has to kind of do it all, but with disparate functions involved.
Exactly. And again, it keeps coming back to measurable, because you cannot scale something if it's not measurable, and you absolutely cannot make it predictable if it's not measurable. If you don't know, if you cannot see the entire partner lifecycle in one place, how do you really understand why one partnership is successful and another is not, right? You can't even understand your full ideal partner profile that way, because you're just going to say, hey, it's a North American agency with at least 100 people that works with companies between this and this ACV. Like, that's only going to get you so far.
Yeah, I agree. The granularity and the reporting, as an example, is super key. I should be able to go to any partner manager on the team and say, hey, who is your top performing partner and why? Who's your least performing partner and why? Across partner types, what's the average contract value differences? What's the sales cycle length difference, the win rate difference, et cetera? And tools like Euler do that. But now let's talk about traction for you, which has obviously been explosive. We know you posted recently about hitting 1 million ARR in your first year, which is an incredible accomplishment. And you've been shipping product features like crazy. Can you walk us through a few of your newest features or integrations that you're especially excited about?
Yeah. There's so much stuff. Obviously we launched, I think the one that I'm most excited about is the Deal Flow AI. So this basically allows you where if you're getting a warm introduction or a deal registration from a partner via email, which, let's be honest, most of the time that's how that happens. If it's a deal of any kind of meaningful size, then what happens? You're either putting it into your PRM, you're putting it into your CRM, and this is as the partner manager, or very often you're kicking it to a sales rep and hoping that they put it in the CRM correctly and tag the partner, which, let's be honest, best case scenario is a 50-50 shot, which means that someone is having to do something manually, and you really lose a lot of time, you lose a lot of momentum, and you lose attribution. And so with Dealflow AI, when the partner manager gets that email, or the sales rep for that matter, they can either CC Euler and loop in the sales rep, or just forward that email to Euler, and our system will parse out the details of that referral or deal registration, no structure required, and register it automatically. So this is one that I've honestly been talking about to my co-founder probably since we started the company, because personally, maybe another hot take is that I think referral forms and deal registration forms are stupid, and I hate them. And I've always hated them because I hate anything that creates friction in the partner's experience, right? In their ability to help send you or drive you business. And so this is just one of the many kind of like AI features and functionality that we will be releasing that kind of contemplate like, what's the simplest way to get this done without anyone having to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in love with this feature. In previous programs I've been a part of, I've asked RevOps teams to kind of build something similar to this out, but certainly not as robust or scalable by any means. And so I've lived it. And a key takeaway from what Greg said there for the audience is, every single manual thing that you have going on in your partner program in your day-to-day operation just completely hampers scalability, right? And so this really does unlock scalability. It also kind of meets partners where they're at nowadays. And this is really how most of it does happen from a referral perspective. So I do love that feature.
Yeah, and another one that we actually just launched, which I'm super excited about. So it's really funny. We built Euler as a two-way platform from day one. Like even in the prototype, there was sent and received. And it's really funny. This is this is maybe another hot take. I think you should be sending your partners more leads or more business. I think you should actually create a bi-directional partnership, because let's be honest, almost no partners of note really care about rev share, right? That's not going to move the needle for them. So I've always built my programs very bi-directionally, like value in, value out. Let's try to make it equitable. It might not be equitable, but let's try. And so we built an ability to send partners referrals or leads or deals out of the system immediately. No one asked about it for the first year and a half, which is kind of nuts to me. Over the last 6 months, it's been coming up like crazy. So you can actually send referrals and leads directly out of Euler. You can pull them from your CRM. If you use our partner directory, it also sends an outbound lead that you can track, all fully measurable. But something that we literally just built that I'm super excited about is for companies that are at the center of an ecosystem and they're sending more business out actually than they're getting in, which happens, they can actually start to track the revenue share and everything that's owed commission back to them. Because traditional platforms are like, hey, we owe you commission, partner, but what about everything the partner owes you? So we just shipped that for a big customer of ours who's the center of an ecosystem. And it's super cool because they were literally losing like millions and millions of dollars on rev share that they were owed from their ecosystem partners, and now they've got a closed loop.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. It's amazing how some of these major companies I've dealt with, publicly traded, e-commerce platform companies as an example, who had very antiquated systems of managing, rev share. They'll send you a Google Excel sheet at the end of a quarter and say, fill it in, and then we'll see what we owe you. So glad to see that tools like Euler are solving that problem. I want to switch gears here a bit and just talk about how you've been building Euler from a GTM perspective. Obviously, the product's world-class, but I want to focus on your distribution engine. And you personally have become incredibly well-known on LinkedIn, respected and consistent with your content. How much of that has been intentional versus natural? And then how has building your personal brand fueled Euler's GTM strategy and what has become a very popular founder-led GTM in modern SaaS?
It was not intentional at all. It was slightly intentional. I wasn't trying to build like a founder-led brand. I wasn't trying to build a personal brand. I was just trying to build a little bit of a personal brand, actually. That's not true. So I started Euler. Really, we wrote our first line of code in March of 2023. And I started trying to talk myself into posting on LinkedIn like 6 months before that. And it still took me another 6 months, a little more than 6 months after that to start posting. I didn't really start posting till December of 2023. Cause I'm not I don't want that attention. I don't like that attention. That's not who I am. I don't even like to be the focal point of a conversation necessarily, which I think people might find surprising. But I was just kind of like, you know what? Like, I don't know anything that other folks don't know. Like, I don't really have anything super, mind-blowing to share. And also I think at the time, like most of the people posting on LinkedIn were kind of like they were acting as if, and it didn't actually, it all seemed like BS. Like they weren't really providing real value. And so I was like, oh, am I just going to become like an influencer? Like I really didn't like that term. I didn't like that concept. And so I just kind of I finally I, I hired someone to like really just kind of like be there an hour a week to like just push me to do it. I did all the writing, but they were just kind of like an accountability buddy and helped me kind of clean up the format. And that got me to start doing it. And the response, like pretty much from the beginning, was kind of nuts. Like I wrote a few posts that went nuts, and all of a sudden, like it was like, oh, there's a big gap in the market for like tactical, hands-on advice and kind of like truth telling about the job. And so I just kind of kept doing it, and it kept working. And to answer your question of how it's done for us, we have never sent a marketing email. We have never sent a cold email or a cold LinkedIn message to anybody or anything like that. I guess I did send a cold Slack to you technically to get your feedback. But we have never done any kind of real outbound or marketing. And we've just been booked every single week with demos basically since we started. And it has really kind of like taken on a life of its own in creating this very founder-led brand, which like when I started, I didn't know that was a thing. I wasn't like, hey, I want to build a founder-led brand. Like only recently did people point out to me that that's like the hot thing now and that I've done it rather successfully, and none of it was intentional.
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a great blueprint for anyone, whether you're founder level or earlier stage career. One of the, I definitely co-sign about the state of content as of, a few years ago, which was highly fluffy, very surface level, a lot of echo chamber activity happening. I think the biggest thing I learned through my own journey, which sounds like it was similar to yours in getting engagement, was people don't want to be told what to do. They want to be told how to do it. Right. And I think there's a big difference. The how to do something is like a user manual, an SOP. Like what did Greg do to build the GTM strategy for Euler? Right. Like that is a very specific set of instructions, so to speak, which I think is very different than just saying what he did and describing it at a high level. And so I'm not surprised that you've had such a quick amassing of a huge following. And then speaking of that, the last question here is, what specific advice would you give to other early stage founders who think they don't have time for personal brand building? Because I think there is a shift as you reference. So what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone who maybe isn't yet posting, but should start to think about it?
Yeah. I was actually just talking to our mutual friend, Justin Zimmerman, yesterday, and he pointed out something that I never really thought about, which was a lot of companies spend time building a product and getting that product into the market. And what building this kind of like founder-led brand and leading with value, because I don't think I posted anything about Euler for like a year after I started posting. It was all just value-added content, establishing my credibility and just trying to add value to the space. And then what that did for us is we actually built the product. Like we didn't need to try to get the product in the market because we built it in the market. We built it with the market. And so I think that if you think about it as like, hey, I just need people to start listening to me. I don't know if, look, it could work. You could hire someone that's very expensive to help you with it and it could work. But I think it works much better if you actually are in the market, like really understanding the people that you're building for. What are their challenges? What are their pains? Like, what are their dreams, hopes, aspirations, motivations? And then build with them. And that just creates such a different perception of who you are, because people aren't like, hey, this person's selling me something. They're like, yeah, he's also selling something, but the majority of what he says is actually just trying to help me be more successful, regardless of whether I buy the thing that he's selling. And that has just been very successful for us, because like my entire mission is not like build Euler. My entire mission is to make partnerships predictable and to get more businesses to adopt it as a core GTM strategy. And so like the stuff I do on the content side is just as important as what we build on the platform side.
Yeah, I love that. That's also a great line. And the way I think about the content, especially coming from founders, and there's an increasing number of successful founders who are now starting to really engage online, is it's really giving your potential buyers an opportunity to try before they buy, right? It's really establishing your authority. And they're saying to themselves, okay, this guy, Greg, he's pumping out some really useful tactical content. That makes me believe more in everything about Euler. Like you're legitimizing your own product by showing up as a true thought leader, offering up tactical advice. right? And eventually, yeah, Euler will scale to a point where you're going to have people maybe doing social for you and posting, and they're champions of the brand. But I think now is such an important time for you as the person who knows this problem better than anyone, who's the one who pioneered this product, to be the one as the voice of the product, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Sweet. All right. Well, we'll kick off the last stretch here. And I just want to talk about mentorship, a little bit of our mastermind program, and ultimately making strategic bets. And, Euler has been Partnership Mastermind's most committed sponsor to date, helping students who don't have access to L&D budget get into our programs, graduate, and have major outcomes, which I'm super grateful for to you and the Euler team. I'm curious, why has that investment made sense to you, and what advice would you give other vendors about how to invest in ecosystems that actually move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, it was when you approached me about it, like I've always loved what you were building, because there just wasn't anything like that out there. And almost nobody that does partnerships, like 99, I would say 0.9% of people that do partnerships, were never taught how to do partnerships. They just learned on the job. Hopefully they were fortunate like me to have a good VP that kind of like gave them the right fundamentals. But even still, like, it's such a complex job. It's such a hard job. It requires so many hard and soft skills. And, maybe that is one of the reasons that that there aren't more rigorous partnerships operators, is like, they just don't know how. No one's taught them. No one's provided the playbook and to your point, like not just the what, but the how to do it. And when I saw what you were doing and what you were providing the first time you like showed me your curriculum, I was like, this is fantastic. Like, I wish I had this when I was starting out. Like, there's stuff in there that I didn't even necessarily know, but all made a ton of sense. And so like, our biggest regret is that we don't, as a bootstrap startup, have enough budget to sponsor more seats, because again, my entire mission is to make partnerships like so core that it's not even a question of whether a business should be doing it. And we could build the best platform that has ever existed in the world. It's not going to do the job for you. It's going to do some of it for you, right? It's not going to do the whole job for you. It's not going to create the strategy for you necessarily. Maybe in the future with the AI, but you know what I mean? So people need to know what to do and how to do it. And what you're doing and what you're building with Partnership Mastermind is the best thing I've seen, hands down, that provides that knowledge to folks. And so it's an investment in the future of partnerships. Investing in the people that take your course is an investment in the future of partnerships. And we're building a platform for the future of partnerships. So it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, certainly appreciate those kind words. And I totally agree. I think in any tool, it's like, I always liken it to like a carpenter, so to speak. Like, carpenter has a variety of tools available to them. But if they never went to carpentry school and don't know how to frame a house or, do the plumbing, so to speak, then you're not going to have a successful house built, right? So I think it's been a beautiful partnership. I'm certainly grateful for it, and certainly looking forward to more students coming through the program. But just to wrap up here, speaking to, for advice for partner pros and other GTM leaders, you've had a front row seat to what best-in-class teams look like. You've built them. Now you're certainly getting deep exposure into them with your customer base. Would love to finish with, what's one motion, system, or mindset shift do you think every partner manager should adopt in the following year?
It's just tracking and measurement, honestly. You cannot figure out what's working and what's not working. Or let me rephrase that. You cannot figure out why something is working or not working without tracking and measurement, because otherwise you're just guessing, right? Like, hey, here's my top 10 partners. Here's my bottom 10 partners. Let's try to draw some dotted lines and figure out like what they have in common. Like, that's not scalable. That's just, again, guessing. And figuring out like, hey, our top partners all went from onboarding to activation in under 30 days. That's a signal, right? Our best partners all sent us their first lead like within the first 30 days after that, or like all these different little pieces of a life cycle show you why something works and why it doesn't work. And the problem that we have in partnerships is that it's not predictable. And it's not predictable because we cannot track these things. And it's very difficult, even if we could track these things, because unlike sales or marketing, where the vast majority of the variables are in your control, in partnerships, the biggest variable is not in your control at all, which is the partner. And so you need to be able to have as much control of the other variables and as much visibility into them to figure out what makes a partnership successful or a program successful or not. Because that is the only way you scale. And again, like if it's not scalable and it's not predictable, it will not get investment, and we will never leave the kind of side table or the little kids table or whatever you want to call it and be considered a core GTM function at the end of the day.
Yeah, I love that. I think a key takeaway for the audience there is controlling what you control. The measurement is key. And the best operators I know, including the Gregs of the world, are people who can isolate the variables. They can look at a specific play, emotion, function, partnership, and they can isolate all the individual variables that are in their control. And they know how to strategically test dialing them one at a time and seeing what the outcome is, and then continue optimizing until you get the desired outcome, which I think is an underrated skill in and of itself. And just to finish up here, because I think it's relevant to that, a ton of our listeners and a lot of people in our community are kind of at that senior IC level, not yet a people manager, but they're really gunning to break into a leadership type role vis-a-vis a director of partnerships, head of partnerships, or first time VP of partnerships. In your experience, what is the number one thing that holds someone in that position back? And perhaps what's one top tip you can give someone? Because there's a ton of people who are trying to make that huge breakthrough. In your experience, what's the number one tip for that?
Yeah, I mean, the number one tip is look at how other executives are operating, right? If you look at a VP of sales or a CRO or a VP of marketing or a CMO, they understand tactics, they understand hiring, they understand managing a P&L and like managing a budget, and how much their team spends and makes. And they understand managing up to the executive suite. And those are the skills that you need, right? Like as an IC, you just do. You might be a particularly strategic IC, but you're just doing. But then you have to be able to actually understand like, what are all the ICs doing and what do they need to do to be successful? But how do I zoom out and look at this strategically? And how do I not only like build the strategy, the team, the playbook, the process, the tracking, and the P&L, but then how do I actually communicate that to the executives or the board in their language in a way that they will understand? This is why we're doing partnerships. This is how we're doing partnerships. This is what investment is needed in it. And this is the outcome that I can feel comfortable promising, or from their side, I can feel comfortable getting from that investment. And that is the bridge to gap. We have to start operating just like any other executive leader.
Yeah, I totally co-sign with that. And that's one of the parts of your content that I resonate the most with when you talk about in leadership positions of getting to establish those relationships cross-functionally with the rest of your, equivalent peers, so to speak, early. And that's definitely one of the biggest mistakes I've made in my leadership positions is I kind of took those for granted. I thought, we're going to see each other a bunch on these like big executive meetings. I'll naturally develop a relationship. What I should have done is invested a lot more time, because it really hampered how quickly I could establish a cohesion, say, between sales and partnerships, where AEs weren't taking us seriously. If I'd have done my job in investor relationships at the top level, that would have radiated down faster. So of all the things you said there, one thing for me at least is how important it is to establish that camaraderie across your org, and obviously managing up goes hand in hand with that. Sweet. Cool. Well, look, just to wrap up here, Greg, where can people learn more about Euler, and what's the best way to follow your work and to reach out if they're curious?
Yeah, absolutely. EulerApp.com, EULERAPP.com if you want to learn more about the platform. LinkedIn, if you want to follow me, don't hesitate to send me a DM. I'm not always the fastest at responding. My LinkedIn inbox is a little nuts, but I will eventually always respond. If we're in Partnership Leaders Slack or Pavilion Slack, hit me up there. I'm a very open person. I try to help as much as I have the time to do so, but just anyone's trying to build a career in partnerships or scale at their partner program, come find me.
Absolutely. We'll be sure to include those links in the description for this pod, wherever you're listening. Look, Greg, this was incredible. I sincerely appreciate everything you're doing for the ecosystem, for me personally. And thanks so much for being part of this community.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.